Have you ever encountered a word that you did not know when you were reading something? What about a word that did not seem to make sense based on your understanding of its definition? Our knowledge of a word's meaning or lack thereof influences our overall comprehension of what we read. So, how do we determine what these unknown words mean? Well, we could consult a dictionary, but no one is really likely to be carrying one around with them at all times. However, in the digital age, we do have access to our mobile devices, which we can use to look up a word's meaning on Google or a dictionary app. But what if we're in a situation where we do not have access to those important tools? The good news is that we can use the passage itself to help us identify the meaning of our unknown word using what are known as context clues. So what exactly are context clues? Well, these are words and sentences or phrases around a word that provides us with clues to its meaning. Basically, what that means is that we can look for other words within a passage or even other phrases that will help us figure out what the author is trying to say and help us determine the meaning of those unknown words. Typically, we're going to encounter three types of context clues. The first will be clues that are within nearby sentences. The second type will be examples that are directly given by the author. And then finally, we may have words that are defined but set off by commas within the sentence itself. We're going to take a look at an example of each of these types of context clues. First, we can identify the meaning of unknown words by looking for clues in the words and phrases of the surrounding sentences. Let's take a look at this example and see if we can determine the meaning of the word digressed. President Martinez rarely digressed in her State of the Union speech. She had 5 important points to make, and she did not stray from those subjects. She did not discuss irrelevant details. So the word that we want to examine is digressed. What does digressed mean? We're going to look at some clues in the passage and see if it points us in the right direction of determining its meaning. We find our first clue in the next sentence when it says that she did not stray from those subjects. So it's referring to the subjects of the 5 important points that she needed to make. So she never digressed from those. So did not stray is our first clue. The following sentence gives us our next clue. She did not discuss irrelevant details. So did not discuss irrelevant details. So what does this mean? Well, if we look at this passage, it's saying that she stuck to her 5 points and she never moved away from those. So based on the clues that are given, we can determine that digressed means that she did not stray from the main subject or the main topic. So did not stray from the main subject. An author may provide us with context clues to an unknown word or phrase by giving us direct examples that will help clue us into its meaning. Any ecological crisis, such as global warming or mass extinctions of plants and animals, can have serious long-term consequences. In this case, our unknown phrase is ecological crisis. So what in the world does ecological crisis mean? Well, we can start by looking at the word itself. So ecological deals with ecology, which ecology deals with plants, animals, and environments. All right? Ecology, plants, animals, and the environments in which they live. And then the word crisis. A crisis, of course, is referring to a big problem. So we can say a major problem or concern. Now, what does the author provide us to give us some examples of an ecological crisis? In this case, this author mentions two specific ones that are set off by commas. So I use the phrase any ecological crisis, comma, such as, so this right here provides us with a clue that he or she is getting ready to give us examples. The first one is global warming. So that is an example of an ecological crisis. The second is mass extinctions of plants and animals. And then goes on to explain that they can have long-term consequences. So our clues to help us understand what an ecological crisis is are stated directly by the author, giving us the example of global warming and mass extinctions of plants and animals. So an ecological crisis is a major problem that affects plants, animals, and their environments. And finally, an author may provide clues to an unknown word by giving us a direct definition that is often set off by commas. Let's take a look at this example. Dendrologists, or people who study trees, can tell a lot about weather extremes or other stresses the trees live through. In this case, we want to determine the meaning of the word dendrologist. So, what is a dendrologist? Again, an author may provide a direct definition, and we just need to look for the commas that set it off. In this case, we have dendrologist, comma, or, okay, so that's one of our key words to let us know they're getting ready to define what a dendrologist is. People who study trees, comma, can tell a lot about weather extremes or other stresses the trees lived through. So we don't need to really do anything to determine the meaning of this word because the author has already told us what a dendrologist is. So what is a dendrologist? It's a person who studies trees. Let's work through a couple of examples from iExcel where we are given the meaning and we need to determine what word matches that meaning based on the context from the passage. In this case, we want to find the word that means combined into one. In 1971, 6 small Middle Eastern states or emirates merged to form the United Arab Emirates, or UAE. The UAE now consists of 7 emirates, and the country's first national elections were held in 2006. The UAE is a major oil producer and has become a popular destination for tourists. Now, once again, we want to look for the word that means combined into one. Let's see if we can identify some clues that will help us figure that out. So at the beginning of the passage, we're told that 6 small Middle Eastern states or emirates, okay, so what it's doing is it's defining the word states as emirates, merged to form the United Arab Emirates. 6 small Middle Eastern states merged to form the United Arab Emirates. So let's pay attention to this word merge right here. So what this is saying is that these 6 small states merged and became the United Arab Emirates. 6 becomes 1. Combined into 1. Therefore, we can conclude that combined into 1 is the meaning of the word merged. Now let's see if we can identify the word that means people who aren't members of the armed forces. Let's take a look at the passage together. The first 7 Americans named as astronauts in 1959 were pilots from the Army, Air Force, or Marines. The selection committee believed that their flying experience will be valuable in spaceflight. Nowadays, though, many astronauts are civilians without military experience, but with relevant degrees in science, engineering, or math. All right, so we need to find out which word means non-military personnel, or people who are not members of the armed forces. So we're told that the first astronauts were pilots, okay, and they were pilots from the Army, Air Force, or Marines. Well, we know Army, Air Force, and Marines are all branches of the military. So it goes on to talk about the selection committee, saying that their flying experience will be valuable. Okay, that makes sense. But look at the final sentence, or the last sentence. Nowadays, though, many astronauts are civilians without military experience. So in other words, this without military experience means they are not members of the armed forces. Well, who doesn't have military experience? The word used in this passage is civilians. Therefore, civilians are people who are not members of the armed forces. In one of our earlier lessons, we talked about how an author will sometimes provide clues such as synonyms of words that will help us determine the meaning. Let's take a look at a couple of examples where we need to identify the synonym of the bolded word. A tradition with roots in ancient Mexico, a quinceañera, is a celebration of a girl's 15th birthday and passage to adulthood. Family and friends gather and bestow bracelets, necklaces, and medals upon the girl. Parents and grandparents may also give her special messages or advice. So the word that we're not quite sure what it means in this passage is bestow. So it says that friends gather and bestow bracelets, necklaces, and medals upon the girl. The next sentence says, parents and grandparents may also give her special messages or advice. So we're told that family and friends bestow things to her. And then it says that they may also give. So in this case, the word bestow also means give. Now, we learned a strategy where we can replace the word to see if it still makes sense. So let's replace the word bestow with give. Alright, so family and friends gather and give bracelets, necklaces, and medals upon or to the girl. Does that make sense? Yes, it's still within the context of the passage of what is going on during the quinceañera. So family and friends gather and bestow or give gifts. They may also give her special messages or advice. In this case, bestow means give. Let's look at one more example and see if we can identify a synonym of the given bolded word. Since 2004, Time magazine has published an annual list of the 100 people they feel are the most influential in the world. While the list usually includes politicians and world leaders, it also identifies a host of other powerful people such as tech innovators, artists, singers, and even models. So our bolded word in this example is influential. And then the author gives us some examples of who these influential people could be, such as politicians and world leaders. That gives us an idea of what influential is talking about. Then it goes on to say it also identifies a host of other powerful people. So influential is referring to these people, such as politicians, world leaders, tech innovators, artists, singers, and models. What other word does the author use to refer to those individuals? Well, if you look right here, powerful. So influential people are also powerful people. Once again, we can apply our strategy and see if powerful will make sense if we replace the original word with its synonym. So it says Time magazine has published an annual list of the 100 people they feel are the most powerful in the world. While the list usually includes politicians, world leaders, and so on, again, does the sentence make sense and maintain the context? Yes, taking the word influential and replacing it with the word powerful still tells us what the author is trying to get across in this case. So powerful is a synonym of influential. In our previous lesson on synonyms and antonyms, we talked about how authors will often provide clues to a particular word that he or she may use by pointing out the antonyms of that word. So we can determine the meaning of a word if we know what the opposite meaning is. Let's see if we can determine the meaning of the bolded word by identifying its antonyms within the passage. Valentina, a new addition to the Norwood High School softball team. After much practice, she has improved quickly and become an adept hitter. On defense, however, she is still somewhat clumsy and frequently misses easy catches. All right, so we are told that Valentina is an adept hitter. Okay, so some clues that help us figure out what that means. It says she's improved quickly. Okay, so if she's improved, then does adept mean that she's gotten pretty good at hitting? Well, let's see if we can identify the antonyms to determine if our possible conclusion is true. The last sentence states, on defense, however, she is still somewhat clumsy and frequently misses easy catches. Okay? We have the word however. That clues us in that we are talking about the opposite situation of the previous sentence. So it says that on defense, she is still somewhat clumsy, frequently misses easy catches. So it's telling us that her defense on the softball team needs some work. Why? Because she's clumsy and she frequently misses easy catches. So if we take that and look at the contrast to the previous sentence, we're told that, at least on her offense, that she's improved quickly. She's become an adept hitter. So what is the opposite of adept? Well, we find that in the sentence where it says she is still somewhat clumsy. So clumsy is going to be the opposite of adept. Let's look at one more example and see if we can determine the meaning of the word insufficient by identifying its antonym in this passage. In a criminal trial, lawyers for the defense may try to have the case thrown out for a variety of reasons. For example, they may ask the judge to dismiss the case for insufficient evidence if they feel like the prosecuting attorney hasn't provided enough proof. So our word is insufficient. Now, we know from our previous lesson on prefixes that in means not. So insufficient will mean not sufficient. Well, what are the lawyers saying is not sufficient? The evidence. Why would they say that the evidence is not sufficient? Well, let's continue on the sentence. If they feel like the prosecuting attorney hasn't provided enough proof. So we know that proof and evidence mean the same thing. So insufficient evidence will be the opposite of enough proof. So insufficient the opposite of insufficient would be enough. So insufficient is not equal to enough, which means it's the opposite meaning. Before we close out this lesson, let's look at a couple more of examples and see if we can identify the meaning of the bolded word based on the context in which it's used in the passage. So as we read, let's see if we can identify some of the clues that tell us what the word means. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States by adding 828,000 square miles of land to the nation. This acquisition resulted in the U.S. having unexplored territory. So, in 1803, President Thomas Jefferson asked Congress for approval to fund an expedition. The goals of the expedition were to explore the new territory and to find a practical route to the western part of the country. Jefferson chose Meriwether Lewis to lead this expedition. Lewis selected William Clark as second in command. This was the birth of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now, the word that we are trying to identify the meaning is acquisition. So the sentence in which it's used states, this acquisition resulted in the U.S. having unexplored territory. So we need to ask the question, what acquisition? Well, we need to go back a sentence to determine that. The first sentence states, in 1803, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States by adding 828,000 square miles of land to the nation. So the acquisition is referring to the Louisiana Purchase, and the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States, adding 828,000 square miles. So this acquisition added to the nation. It added to the size of the land that we owned. So if we look at our answer choices, addition, split, removal, and invention, well, we're almost directly given the definition of acquisition because the author used the word adding. Therefore, acquisition means addition. In our final example, let's see if we can identify the meaning of the word malleable. Since at least 4000 BCE, people have worn jewelry made of gold. These days, however, gold is used for reasons other than just decoration. Gold is malleable, so it can be molded into many forms. This makes gold ideal for use in many modern technologies. For example, a small amount of gold is used to carry electrical signals in devices like cell phones and computers. The face mask of an astronaut's helmet can be coated with gold to block the sun's rays. Thin pieces of gold can even be used as a lubricant to protect moving parts in space. So, what is the meaning of malleable as used in this sentence? Well, as you recall, there are three types of context clues that an author will provide to help us determine the meaning of words. So it could be just clues in nearby sentences, maybe even an example or a definition that's set off by commas. In this case, we are told that gold is malleable, so it can be molded into many forms. That word "so" is explaining the meaning of malleable. It's providing us with a definition. So it can be molded into many forms. So if something is malleable, that means that it can be molded. So which of our examples or which of our answer choices means that something can be molded into many forms? Delicate or fragile, very valuable, easily shaped, or extremely heavy. Well, if we think about what it means to mold something, molding means that we shape it. Therefore, something that is malleable is easily shaped. As we can see, context clues actually help provide us with the understanding of the meaning of unknown words by being good detectives and investigating the words and phrases used in the surrounding sentences. So we've seen that authors may give us clues in those other sentences to help us determine a word's meaning. In other cases, they may provide examples to help explain what a word means. And finally, they could even give us a direct definition that usually we can identify by seeing that it is set off with commas in the passage. Now, at the beginning of the lesson, I pointed out that a dictionary is a great tool to give us the meaning of an unknown word. By no means am I saying never use a dictionary. If you cannot determine the meaning of a word and you have access to a dictionary or to your mobile device, by all means, please use it. However, I wanted you to see that there are some tricks that you can use and some strategies that you can apply to determine the meaning of a word if you do not have access to those tools.